And penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Hello, everyone. Um, on Google Meet tonight, I have Mark and Chris. And here I have Tyler and Joe and Glenn and Joe. So, welcome everyone. We're going to start chapter 3 of Living by Vow. And this is about the 3 refuges. I want to start because Shohaku here uses the verbiage that they use at Minnesota Zen Meditation Center. And it's a bit different than the one we typically use. So, and there are comments that he makes about that wording. So let's just start. I'm going to read through the 3 refuges as they're printed here. I take refuge in the Buddha, vowing with all sentient beings, acquiring the great way, awakening the unsurpassable mind. Second one is I take refuge in Dharma, vowing with all sentient beings, deeply entering the teaching, wisdom like the sea. And I take refuge in Sangha, vowing with all sentient beings, bringing harmony to all, completely without hindrance. So it's a little bit broader than the ones we use. Interestingly enough, one of the things Shohaku says is that without these 3, there is no Buddhism. That is, without the historical Buddha, of course, there certainly couldn't have been. But the teachings about reality and the reality itself that we call the Dharma, and Sangha, of course, is the group of people who practice. He goes on to say, from the very beginning, the Buddha as teacher, the Dharma as teaching, and the Sangha as community have been essential elements of Buddhism. As he starts to talk about taking refuge in the Buddha, what he starts with talking about is the idea that the translation of acquiring the great way actually can also be translated as understanding with the body. And then he talks about how what that means is it's not just about understanding, it's not just about intellect. We have to do the practice. We have to carry it out, we have to live it. We have to embody the great awakening of the Buddha in our everyday life. Awakening the unsurpassable mind is the next thing that he talks about. The unsurpassable mind is simply Bodhi mind. It is, and when we embody the great awakening, he talks about we awaken to the awakening mind. And then he says it's a strange expression, but that is the reality. We awaken the awakening mind in order to wake up. We're usually asleep. We're usually dreaming. We imagine this world, our lives, and ourselves. We create dream worlds and then believe that they are real. They are only constructs of our mind. We think that we're the center of the world and all other people and things are resources to make us happy. To make a happy ending for our story. if we embrace the practice, however, we try to act based on the reality that exists before we process the world through the intellect. Our thinking is based on our education and our experiences since birth. I would also throw in there's some genes that take place and some social training and other things that all come about and bring forth how we see the world. These experiences, though, are uh, a limited way of viewing the world. So we have to wake up to the reality. If we stay simply with how we see the world, that's limited. Experiencing reality through enlightenment is seeing reality as it actually is. And he goes on to say, when we awaken to reality that has not been processed by our ego-centered mind, we cannot help having compassion for all beings. We realize that we live together with all beings, supported by networks of interconnections. We share air, water, and life by offering ourselves to each other. We live supported by all beings. In turn, we must support all other beings. This is what compassion is. We do not and cannot live independently as limited and conditioned individuals. This is why we take refuge in the Buddha. Um, One of the things that I just heard this week as we look at how we all interact and impact each other is I was listening to a science thing, and they were talking about the irony that we are training ourselves using air conditioning to stay in when it's warm and to not tolerate the heat. And at the same time, we're adding to global warming, making it hotter. Everything is connected. Um, he goes on to talk then about the Dharma and points out that the word Dharma in Sanskrit has a lot of different meanings. But the two that we use in Buddhism are the Buddha's teaching about reality and reality itself. Both are referred to as the Dharma. He then talks about how the phrase deeply entering the teaching means that we need to familiarize ourselves with the sutras, with the teachings themselves. And talks about one of the meanings of the translation is the storehouse of the sutras. This doesn't mean we have to learn all of the sutras, but it does mean that we need to dedicate ourselves to studying the reality of the teachings. In Sanskrit, Dogen says, these mountains and waters of the present are manifestations of the way of the ancient Buddhas. And then what Shohaku then says is, what he's saying here is that the reality of all beings is itself a sutra. Not only mountains and waters, but also the birds singing, the sun shining, everything happening around us are sutras teaching us the reality of being. Buddha nature extends to everything. And therefore, everything that is out there can teach us about it. Nothing lasts forever. Everything is always changing, and there is no fixed ego or substance. All beings in the universe teach this reality, but we don't listen. We don't really see it. Typically, we are blind to the reality of impermanence and interdependence. The deeper meaning is really to awaken to the reality before our eyes, the reality that we actually live. The phrase wisdom like the sea refers to an unlimited and boundless perspective. Again, using the sea as a metaphor, I believe, for the ultimate, for the absolute. We base our actions on our conditioned understanding. We base our actions on our conditioned understanding and perceptions and opinions. The beginning of wisdom is to see that our view is limited, that no matter what we know, no matter how much we know, it's always a limited view. Studying the Buddhist teaching, we become free from our limited views and open ourselves to boundless reality. We value Dharma more than our own limited opinions and views based on our personal karma. Let me just stop there. Any thoughts or questions before I go any further? I'm just kind of cruising along here. And okay. He then talks about taking refuge in the Sangha, and talks about how actually at the time of the Buddha, they were just developing groups, which they called Sanghas. And these were a democratic community of members who share the same interests and status. And so this was, could be anybody or anything. And in our case, obviously, we share the Dharma. The phrase bringing harmony is a translation of the Japanese word tori, which means to unify. A Buddhist Sangha is Buddhist Sangha members are unified by the Dharma. To have harmony, we need something that unifies us. In terms of a Sangha, we need to cook ourselves and make these individuals into one community with one taste. He compares that to making soup and putting in all sorts of vegetables and things and cooking it until you have one taste. That he then says harmony unifies a collection of individuals into a community in which we can take refuge, completely without hindrance. With harmony and unity, there is no hindrance. When individuals think me first, endless problems and obstacles arise. But when we wake up to impermanence and egolessness and share the life of this moment, there is no hindrance. Of course, there are still difficulties to overcome, but with harmony, we can work on that. Go ahead.
So we just had the image when we talk about Sangha, right, and the various definitions of Sangha. This group here, right, in person and online, right, the wider Sangha of our community here in Cleveland, the then wider Sangha in these wider and wider circles of beings. I had the image of the Russian nesting doll. right?
Hmm.
As this ever widening sphere, but all of the boundaries are transparent. So instead of when you see the Russian nesting doll, you see the biggest one, and you have to take that one off to see the smaller one. But I see it as transparent, so they're all visible at the same time.
So they not only fit together, you see right through them. Yeah.
On the page before, on page 65, it's sort of the same kind of a perspective, but they said we all live as knots within endless net.
Yeah. Yeah,
I never consider myself just one of the knots in endless net, but that's fascinating.
So you think it's not you? Yeah, I mean, that was striking to me in many ways, and the idea that no matter what we encounter, it's a Dharma teacher.
Mhm.
I mean, I probably could have explained that to you before, but I never thought about it that way. So, anything else? So the next thing he talks about is, why do we take refuge? And then he talks about an Indian text that says, many people out of fear take refuge in the deities of mountains, forests, trees, gardens, shrines, and so on. We take refuge in gods because of fear, because we are weak and afraid. And he points out how we are weaker than many animals. But then goes on to say, all phenomenal elements such as too much or too little rain cause suffering in our lives. Full of fear and uncertainty, primitive people needed something to worship, to rely on. Everything outside of us is uncertain, always unchanging and unreliable. We rely on this thing that we believe to be eternal and unchanging. We don't call that God, we just call that emptiness, Buddha nature. Buddha didn't teach us to take refuge in deity beyond this phenomenal world. He taught us to find refuge within this world, within ourselves. This is the basic teaching of the Buddha, and a difference between Buddhism and other religions. The Indian text that he was quoting then continues. Taking refuge in such deities, however, is not excellent and worthwhile. It is not possible to be released from various pains or suffering by means of taking refuge in such kinds of deities. If people take refuge in the Buddha and take refuge in the Dharma and the Sangha, they will, in keeping with the Four Noble Truths, constantly contemplate with wisdom. They know suffering. They know the cause of suffering. They know eternally going beyond suffering. And they know the Eightfold Path. Wisdom is important in Buddhism, together with compassion and faith. In other religions, we can't understand, so we believe. But in Buddhism, we have faith because we have the wisdom to see. By taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, we learn to find stability, peace, and liberation from fear by examining what's happening. We see that the cause of fear is inside of us rather than outside of us. He then talks about different kinds of suffering. Separating from beloved people, meeting with people we don't like, not being able to gain what we want, and not being able to control the 5 skandhas. While the others are painful experiences, it is what he says, the most fundamental form of suffering is the last one. The fact that we can't control the skandhas. We are collections of the 5 skandhas or aggregates: form, sensation, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. These elements are important and always changing. They cannot be controlled. This body and mind is not a possession that can be mastered, much as we all want to. Therefore, human existence itself is always unsatisfactory, and we feel suffering. This is the meaning of suffering in Buddhist teaching. The second of the 4 Noble Truths, delusive desires and attachments based on fundamental ignorance are the cause of all suffering. When we are successful, we want more or fear we're losing what we have. If we're thirsty or hungry, we chase after it to fill ourselves, and if we can't, we suffer. The third truth is the cessation of suffering. Buddha taught that it's possible to be in nirvana, to become free from suffering. Suffering has causes and conditions. If we work on changing those causes and conditions, we can release ourselves from suffering. And then, of course, the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. And it means that we have to view things correctly, base our thinking on reality instead of egocentricity. Speak truthfully, act in accord with right view, engage in wholesome livelihood, make diligent effort, and practice right mindfulness and meditation. He taught us that we can find the real foundation for a peaceful life within ourselves, within this phenomenal world. We rely on many different things, but nothing is really certain. Nothing has truly stable foundation. The only stable foundation for our life, according to the Buddha, is the Dharma and the self. The Dhammapada says, your own self is your mainstay. Or who else could your mainstay be? With you yourself, well trained, you obtain the mastery hard to obtain. Now, I find that an interesting quote because we talk about no self all the time. But there is the phenomenal self, and it's only through our phenomenal self that we can get to the absolute. So I believe that that's what it's talking to here. And expanding on that, then he says, from the Sutanipada, the independent man does not tremble or get confused, but a man who is dependent on something is clutching, grasping at existence in one form or another, and he cannot escape from existences. Neither the Dharma nor the self is eternal and everlasting, and everything is changing. We can't really rely on anything, yet this reality of egolessness and impermanence is itself a foundation of our life. We can find peace and liberation by seeing deeply the impermanence and egolessness of life itself. And he says, this is the only possible, stable, peaceful foundation of us because it is the only reality that is here and now. Reality is ever changing and therefore ever fresh and new. And that's why Uchiyama Roshi urged us to open the hand of thought and to awaken to the reality that is always changing. The Abhidharma Kosa says that by taking refuge, people are surely released from various sufferings. And that is why we are encouraged to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I think of, and Shohaku says that he thinks of the three, that Sangha is the most significant today. And goes on to say that, of course, the Buddha and the Dharma are the basis for the Sangha. However, without Sangha, a living community of people, the Buddha is someone who lived in the past, and his teachings are something in a textbook. Because there's a community of practitioners who follow the teaching and manifest reality in their daily activities, the Buddha and the Dharma come alive right now, right here. He then goes on to say that the meanings of the three treasures actually have become more complex as our understanding of Buddhism has evolved. Shakyamuni said that people who see the Dharma see the Buddha. For them, Shakyamuni Buddha was not just a person with a physical body and who had died. The Buddha was still there as the teaching and as the reality. And this is what we call the Dharmakaya. The Dharma, the Buddha's teaching, was the Buddha himself. Historically, Dharma meant the Buddha's teachings, but in Dharma body, it refers to reality itself. This reality was there before Shakyamuni awakened to it, and he said, I didn't invent the truth, teaching, or reality. I was like a person who finds an old castle hidden in the forest. All beings and all things in this universe are manifestations of this original reality. All beings in the universe can be called members of the universal Sangha. This reflecting back on what Glenn was just talking about. Ultimately speaking, the Dharma body is the Buddha treasure. The Dharma, the true way of things as they are, is the Dharma treasure. And all beings as an expression of Dharma are called the Sangha treasure. The three treasures are one body, one reality. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha are just one reality. the historical three treasures are real world manifestations of the absolute three treasures. In order to maintain the Buddhist teaching after he died, the Buddhist image, sutras, and communities of practitioners were considered to be the three treasures. When we become Buddhists, we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. There are three kinds of three treasures, and we take refuge in them all. And I missed one somewhere. I apologize. So he's talking about not only the literal one, but also the absolute one. And somehow when I put this together, I missed that altogether. I think the third one is in fact the teachings. Lastly, well, not lastly, but closely, Dogen said, we take refuge in Buddha because the Buddha is our great teacher. We take refuge in Dharma because the Dharma is good medicine for us. And we take refuge in Sangha because the people in the Sangha are excellent friends to us. Another text says that the Buddha is like a doctor, the Dharma is good medicine, and the people in the Sangha are our nurses. It's another way of thinking about the same thing. To say that the Buddha is a doctor, the Dharma is medicine, and the Sangha members are nurses implies that we are sick. According to Buddhist teaching, all people are sick. He came to see all sentient beings as sick and practiced to find a way to release them from sickness. Eventually, he realized the cause of our sickness is ignorant egocentricity and the desires that arise from it. We also needed some principle to live together in harmony. And this is the second reason for religion, to teach us how to live together with other people. We live in civilizations that have developed over 20 centuries in America, Japan, and Europe, and yet we are still spiritually sick. We still don't know how to live in peace with people from different national, racial, religious, or cultural backgrounds. So the sickness is still there, still needs the medicine, still needs the doctor.
John?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, please.
I'd like to go back to the bottom of page 73.
Okay.
And it's quoting Dogen.
Mm-hmm.
We take refuge in the Buddha because the Buddha is our great teacher. We take refuge in the Dharma because the Dharma is good medicine for us. And we take refuge in the Sangha because the people in the Sangha are excellent friends for us. So my notes for that, so simple, right? Which is what I love about Dogen, because my introduction to Dogen was Bean Time with the book club. And, my first initial reaction is like, what the actual is going on here? But when you read Dogen and you don't try so hard, it's really so simple and so clear. And that sort of statement there is just like perfect encapsulation.
Simple encapsulation. Yeah. Absolutely. I would argue that not all of Dogen is simple.
And I know. It's simple if you want it to be.
I may be simple, but I still, one of the books I read by John Wilhelm said, you want to understand Dogen, don't pay attention to the words, listen to the music, basically. And that was the first thing that finally allowed me to understand some of Dogen. So, yeah, but that is a wonderful, simple statement of all of that. Anything else? Okay. A final place to return. So Dogen says, we take refuge in these three treasures because they are the final place to return. Shohaku goes on to explain that when we grow up, we become, I'm sorry, that when we're children, we are at home. And that's our place. We really don't go anywhere. That's where we keep coming back to. We're simply happy to be there, hopefully. When we grow up, we become travelers. We search here and there for treasure, something valuable or meaningful. We seek happiness and satisfaction. And of course, he then says that sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad. And finally, at the end of our lives, we face death. And regardless of our success or failure, each of us has to face it. And each of us faces it alone. And most people face it with fear. He says we all do, but I've seen enough people who haven't, but they're definitely in the minority. In the past, people were born, lived, got sick, and died all at home. Life and death were right there in front of everyone. But in our modern society, people are born at the hospital. When we're sick, we're at the hospital. When we die, we're usually at the hospital. Life and death have become hidden from us. And there are a lot of ways of seeing how that's changed us, but this is one in particular. I think it does. As we have conquered so many of the ways that people die, I think we've become much more isolated from it. My wife, Michelle, was reading a story about James Cook and his travels around the world, and was really remarking about, and they expected that half of the crew would die. That was what you expected when you went out. And she said to me, why would anybody go? Well, because probably if you stayed home, your chances weren't a whole lot better of surviving. I mean, there were all sorts of diseases, there were all sorts of other things that could kill you, and frequently did. We've lost all of that. We don't have. Death was all around people for many centuries, starting with infant mortality. Babies died. Mothers died in childbirth. People had heart attacks and died when they were in their 30s or 40s. There were all sorts of other things.
Toothache. People died of toothaches.
Yep. Toothache that became an abscess that became sepsis, and it killed you. Yeah, absolutely, it can. So we've become pretty isolated from death and dying in many ways. And Chohaku tells us that we have to wake up to the reality of impermanence in our lives, finding the best and most peaceful way of life. The important point is to return to the matter of life and death, to wake up to the reality of this body and mind, and on that basis create a way of life. The meaning of taking refuge, this is the meaning of taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Let me say that again, I kind of screwed that up. The important point is to return to the matter of life and death, to wake up to the reality of this body and mind, and on that basis, create a way of life. This is the meaning of taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Buddhism is only one of many paths, one way to wake to the reality of our life. We talk about the many rivers that flow into the ocean. And we seek to manifest universal life force, which we have been given. We live on this earth with everything we need as a gift from nature. One of the interesting things that I've read and heard, I believe it is in Braiding Sweetgrass, actually, that it struck me how different our conception of creation is from the Native Americans. She was talking in there about the gifts from Mother Earth, that how Mother Earth was taking care of them. And as opposed to our, you are condemned to earn your livelihood by the sweat of your brow. I mean, that's a real different concept. And yet, in many I think in many primitive religions, I've seen that before, where life and what you have here are given as gifts to you, and not just you're here to struggle and God damn it, you're a sinner and you better straighten up or you're going to hell. It's a real different concept of our world, I think. The Navajos talk about walking in beauty, and they pray every morning. They do their morning prayers. May I walk in beauty today. It's a real different concept. He then says, modern civilization has no direction. We just try to live in an ever more convenient way. We chase after prosperity. We live separate from nature and build an artificial world around us. As we get stronger and stronger, we destroy more and more of the environment. When nature dies, we will as well. This whole universe is like a hospital. We are all sick. The Buddha's teaching and the Buddha's way can be one of the paths to recovery. So that's chapter 3 and what I prepared for tonight. Comments, thoughts? Meaning of life? Anything?
Really appreciate that. It hit in a way that I needed. Like when we talk about the death stuff, and like I thought, so like most of us live, not in the face of that. Not so for me. So like coming back to like choosing to live is harder than it is like dying's easy. So like reversing my mind there, but hearing it just resonated. Appreciate that.
The interesting thing, at least for me, is the practice.
Mm.
It makes all of that fall into place in many ways. And one of the biggest things that I've realized recently, and this is just for myself, is the idea of mindfulness. And I've tried to work at mindfulness for a while now. And I realize anymore, especially if I'm doing some task, I'm pretty mindful. There's not a whole lot else going on. I'm not thinking about something else. I'm not listening to music, which I used to do all the time. Music was always in the background as I was working because it was to make work, it was to make work less painful or something. I don't know. Anymore, a task is just a task. And oftentimes, I honestly enjoy doing things I didn't used to enjoy because I wasn't paying attention. A lot of those things are minor chores. I don't mind mowing the lawn. I don't mind washing. Now, I'm also retired, so I don't have to go. I will own that up front, and that makes it a little easier to do those things. But it's just, okay, well, this is what's in front of me right now. But I sure didn't start that way. I had to work up to that. And all of these things, I think, they just sort of become more natural as you just kind of work at it and see it. And and as we'll talk about Saturday when I do Jukai class, we don't get too crazy about it. Don't, you know, guilt is not what it's about. Being self-derogatory is not what it's about. It's just paying attention to what's going on and doing something different.
I appreciate the emphasis figuring on the Sangha as well. Because like for me, it's easier for me like be in the moment, present stuff, and isolate. Trusting others is the difficult thing. So hearing this community, seeing people enthusiastic about it, sharing this,
Sure.
that helps me feel. I can see the importance of that, the use of that in terms of getting beyond just the ego, doing this myself, being in the moment here, but not connecting with the world around me.
Yeah. Good.
Doing it ourselves together.
Yes.
So
That's what Sangha do it. Each of us doing it together as a Sangha. But we're only one. So. Mark, does your friend have anything to add?
Woof, woof.
Woof, woof. Mark's dog is in the picture. So. Okay. Unless you have anything else, let's chat out. I vow to myself and each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to ask for help when I need it. I'm sorry. To support others, not one in the world, and to ask for help when I need it. To pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I will let you shut.